Hey guys, welcome back to KevinWilsonSBC. Let's do this video on dig or separate, squat or more than 100% anti-squat with slicks. This is going to be an interesting video. We're going to break down some good stuff, so stay tuned. Let's jump in. Let me jump in here real quick. I'm going to show you some very detailed information on this 69 Barracuda that paid for me to do remote suspension work. And this is one of the Hemi cars, 6-speed, that competed last August in Roadkill on Woodward Avenue. And this car would not hook on the street at all. And I'm going to show you before and after changes where this 69 Barracuda was a real contender last August. Stay tuned for those details for sure. Let's set the stage and define some basic things when it comes to drag racing suspension, especially when it's regarding Fourlink. Obviously, there are more suspensions than just Fourlink. You got leaf spring suspension, you got ladder bar suspension. By far, ladder bar, leaf spring, and Fourlink are the three most common suspensions you're going to find on a drag car. And like I said, today's video, we're going to focus on slicks. And this predominantly we're going to focus on Fourlink, and some of this will apply to ladder bars. With regard to slicks, you know, just like my weight loss journey has been, when you count calories and you look at calories burned, those are estimates. You know, it's very well known that even on the nutrition label of most foods, there can be up to a 20% error, plus or minus, on the calories. So if you have some food that's 100 calories, it could be 80 calories or it could be 120 calories. The main thing is just remaining consistent. You know, the Apple Watches, the iPhones, the Android, the devices, the Fitbits that we use to help us calculate how many calories we burned, it's been proven that those heavily overestimate the amount of calories you truly do burn. Well, when we talk about drag racing suspension, one of the most common things that we talk about when it comes to Fourlink is what percent anti-squat are you running on your Fourlink. And you know, from that, you'll hear a lot of people talk about instant center. Oops, instant center is spelled with a C. Instant center. And then with regard to instant center, we're going to talk about what's the height of the instant center. How long is the instant center? Where is the instant center in relation to the center of gravity of your car, that we calculate the center of gravity height and how far back the center of gravity is past the front center line or ahead of the rear center line axle. Instant center and anti-squat is a very good tool from which you can use to create a baseline on where your Fourlink suspension sits. You can also use the percentage of rise. Percentage of rise is mainly something I use with ladder bar cars, but you can also look at the percentage of rise on a Fourlink if you choose to. The main thing to remember about the percentage of anti-squat, that's primarily Fourlink. I get a lot of emails about, hey, I'm trying to calculate the percentage of anti-squat on my ladder bar car. With ladder bars, you have one chassis mount point, and that's why you need to use the percentage of rise. So let's come back to Fourlinks and let's talk about the percentage of anti-squat. I think we generally all should understand by now that if you have over 100% anti-squat, like let's say 135% anti-squat, then generally what this is trying to tell us is that your wheels, your tire and wheel is going to go down and the chassis is going to go up. That's called separating. We are separating the chassis or the body's attached to the chassis. We're separating the chassis from the rear end or the wheel and slick. Generally, when you have more than 100% anti-squat, you're introducing separation. I think we all agree that usually when you have less than 100% anti-squat, like 85% anti-squat, just the opposite is happening. The chassis is coming down, and the wheel and tires appear to be coming up. You're really not sucking the wheel and tires up more so than you are bringing the chassis and the body down over the rear end of the car. So we have these terms and we have this percentage of anti-squat that we generally talk about when it comes to Fourlink. These are not hard and fast rules. Every car is different, and every car has a different wheelbase, unless you're all running Mustangs or you're all running F-bodies or Gen 3 Camaros. We're dealing with different wheelbase lengths. We're dealing with different center of gravity heights. Many of you are dealing with challenges over brackets that were welded onto your rear end and your chassis from someone who had no clue what they were trying to accomplish. And let's say some people are going from a big tire to a small tire. That creates a lot of changes in your suspension geometry. Or you're going from a small tire to a big tire, like you're going from a 28-inch small tire to a 36-inch big tire. That changes a lot of things. A lot of things are getting messed around with when you do that. So I just wanted to start off by revisiting the percentage of anti-squat, and just know it is a tool from which you can baseline your car. What do I mean by that? Let's say you're running 135% anti-squat based on your instant center and your calculations and your math and your wheelbase, your height of your center of gravity, and the height and length of your instant center. Let's say that you're separating too hard, that you're just not able to keep the front end under control, and you're not able to control the amount of separation. Maybe you don't have the most advanced shock valving, and your rebound valving is just not able to control that amount of separation. Well, if you know you're currently at 135% anti-squat and you wanted to take some of that out, you could drop this down to 110% anti-squat. And 110% anti-squat on your car, if you were at 135 and you go to 110%, it's going to calm down the amount of rear separation and how violent that separation may be happening. There's a balance to everything that we're trying to do here. And there's a balance in your car's suspension, the front suspension, the rear suspension, the wheelbase, the type of slick that you're running, big tire, small tire, tubes, no tubes, all of this, horsepower, starting line ratio, torque, two-step, shift points, stall on your converter. These all come into the equation on how your car may react. Back to the percentage of anti-squat. This is just a measurement. It doesn't mean that you are exactly at 110% of your neutral line. Not all neutral lines are 100% scientific. Most of us are generally accept, like for a small block or a big block car or whatever, generally the measurement I'm most concerned about is the measurement from the crankshaft center line to the ground with the car race ready and ready to go. And then based on what type of motor we have, I'll add some inches to get towards the center line of the cam, and then that's my estimation of the center line height. And then obviously the four corner weights are more scientific. I know the weight of the front end, I know the weight of the rear end, and based on that I know how far back along the chassis the center of gravity is. But when it comes to the height of the center of gravity, unless you're truly doing the scientific method, like I have a video, I'll have it in the description, it tells you how to find the exact height of the center of gravity of your car. Most of us are just using a camshaft height center line. So your neutral line from which you're basing this percent of anti-squat is not purely scientific. Here again, it gives us a measurement so that when we make changes, we understand how big of a change we're making. So don't get so hung up on having everything exact. This is why we document where we're at, and then we go out and we video our car and we test and we test and we test and we make video and we study the video, we slow it down, we look at our data, we look at our drive shaft speeds, we look at our acceleration, our G meters, we look at our shock data, we study everything, and then we make informed decisions. With slicks, it's going to be much easier, especially with people who are not running, you know, $700, $800, and $1,000 shocks with very extensive valving in them. You're going to have an easier time on slicks, probably running a little bit under 100% anti-squat. It's really important to know I started years ago really pushing people more towards 100%. And if you remember in my earlier videos, you have motion. This is wasted motion whenever you're squatting and you're separating. You're using energy to move the chassis around, and really what we're trying to accomplish is move the race car forward. That's our goal. That's where the ET comes from, is moving the car forward. So if you look at a car that has a neutral line similar to this, and let's say your center of gravity is right here is your center of gravity. I'm always trying to get my drag cars closer to this line. I'm trying to get on the neutral line, because the more I can get the instant center on the neutral line, the more energy I'm putting into moving the car forward, and less about wasting energy on separating or squatting. Let me be clear, you got to have some of this energy. I'm just talking in absolutes here. Our goal is to have none of this and move the car forward. But we don't live in a perfect world, and we have limited traction. So based on this surface, if it's a virgin street, or a back of the track, or if it's front side no prep, or if it's front side slight prep, or if it's front side radial prep, then there's different things we're going to do to influence the amount of traction our race car has. Anytime you're having to make big extreme swings, those, while it may work, while you may get down the track, I believe you're leaving ET on the table. Big swings like this, getting things really way out of balance at times, while it may work, it's not the best it can be. So that's why I've always kind of preached on getting more anti-squat with slicks. If you're running a small tire, 28, 29 inch tire, and you have tubes and it's a heavy car, you can get away with having more anti-squat than not. I'm not saying you're going to be running 135% anti-squat though, or 150% anti-squat with every small tire slick with a tube. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying based on some of the combinations, I've had a lot of success with running more than 100% anti-squat with small tire slicks. I have big tire slick cars that run more than 100% anti-squat, but in those cars, I have very, very custom and strong rebound valving to keep from crushing the sidewall of that big tire slick. And generally, it has air on the rebound valving, and usually once you get 100 to 120 feet out, you can start bleeding the air off and let the shock begin to work and let the car come up over the tire. You see, whenever you have more than 100% anti-squat, and the body is trying to go up and the wheel's trying to go towards the track, if you have a shock that locks in the chassis and doesn't let that separation occur, you're pretty much telling the chassis it's trying to separate. The shock is saying, nope, I'm not going to let you separate. And it starts to hold the car, and then it actually pulls some weight over the rear of the car. Most of us aren't running those type of shocks though on our drag cars. I still get a lot of guys who are running the QA1 DD series shocks. And the rebound valving in those shocks is not going to hold a car with a slick with 120% or higher anti-squat. I've had cars around 100% where the slick wouldn't hold it, especially with a ladder bar. A ladder bar car normally separates very hard, much more so than people realize, because of how far behind the center of gravity and how much weight is out in front of that chassis mount point. Unless you've got some pretty serious downhill angle on that ladder bar, it's going to separate and drive the slick into the ground. Now, I just said something very critical here. Whenever you're looking at a Fourlink, and let's say this is the rear end and these are the chassis options. You know, I'm not drawing this to scale, okay? Most of us are going to run a top bar, something like that. It's probably going to be anywhere from 8 to 10 degrees down from the rear end to the chassis. On a slick car, predominantly the bottom bar is going to determine a lot of the reaction on squat, dig, I call that digging, squatting, or separation. So if you look at the bottom bar, so let's call this 8 to 12 degrees of downhill from the rear end to the chassis. The bottom bar, ideally, what I'm shooting for in a slick car is level, 0 degrees. That's what I'm really trying to shoot for, because if you think about the rotational forces as you launch the car and the pinion tries to climb the ring gear and the rear end is trying to twist, you are pulling on the chassis this way, you are compressing on the chassis this way. And these two forces create a lot of dynamics on your chassis. If this bottom bar is level, I'm really putting more of my energy into driving the car forward and not separating or squatting. Now, on a slick car, big tire or small tire, I have had very, very good success with running a slight downhill angle on the bottom bar, especially a big tire slick car on a virgin street. Remember the Barracuda I helped out, who was trying to go to run up at Woodard Avenue. Here's what I'm trying to say. This is the beautiful 69 Barracuda from Tony at American Legends Hot Rod, alhotrods.com. And I want to go over how the car came to me. So this is how we started off with Tony. You can see a very slight uphill angle on the bottom bar and a very big downhill angle on the top bar, over 18 degrees down. But the bottom bar is just slightly uphill, 0.6 degrees uphill. Let's take a look at some video. This is slow motion video that Tony sent me, so I don't have good audio on it, but you can see immediately the car goes up into wheel spin and very little front end rise at all. This car does not have a lot of front end travel to begin with, but it really hits and just goes up into wheel speed on the rear, and the front end is really not doing anything. The car really just unloads quickly. This is good stuff, guys. I mean, a very nice Fourlink setup on the back, very nice welds, great, amazing fabrication. Here again, these are single adjustable, strange engineering shocks. I had no choice but to do some changes to the Fourlink with these shocks. Here's his weight With him in it, 3426, you can see pretty evenly distributed weight. So what changes did I make? Big ones. Look at what I did. Took the bottom bar, has almost a 2-degree downhill angle, and I relaxed that top bar a bunch down to about 10 degrees on the downhill rise. So let's hear how the car does here. Yep, he's right out in the middle of the road with cars coming by and with traffic and everything. It really shocked him because he just did a slight dump of the clutch and it grabbed and tried to bring the front end up. Now watch this. Significant improvement on how the car launched. I mean, big time. Front end's trying to come up, hold the front end up, and Tony's like, man, the car just wanted to go. This is on the median of a bare road, dumping the clutch in a 6-speed on a big tire slick car. So what I normally do on a big tire street car without a lot of advanced valving in the shocks is I will change the bottom bar angle to down here. And I will shoot for around a 1 to 3 degree downhill angle from the rear end to the chassis. Now, if you think about that rotational force on the chassis, whenever you do that, it's driving this bottom chassis mount down. And this is driving that top chassis mount back and up because the rear end mount is higher than the chassis mount, so it's trying to lift. At the end of the day, this force here is actually driving the chassis down. When you run a bottom bar 4-link angle that has a little downward angle, it's going to introduce more dig. And I can control the amount of dig with the compression valving on my shocks. And if I need to get more traction over the rear slick and keep the slick planted, I'm going to have less compression valving. To bring more weight over it, I'm going to loosen the front end rebound valving so the front end can come up and move some weight to the rear of the car. And I'm going to help get that slick planted on a street surface. And as I go from a bare surface to a somewhat prepped to a prep track, I'm going to begin increasing the compression valving on my shocks so that I'm not allowing so much weight to come over the rear tires. At that point, as you increase the compression valving, you know, you got this big tire slick on the track and you got all this surface. As I soften compression, it's just going to continue to wrinkle these slicks and really drive this slick flat into the track. If I increase my compression valving, it's actually going to start to cup the bottom of the slick, and I'm not going to have but about this much contact path on the track. And when you start cupping the slick, I'm going to introduce some wheel speed and keep from crushing the sidewalls as much as I was over here. On a bare surface, I'm trying to use the sidewalls of that big tire slick as much as I can to keep the slick planted. If you have a bottom bar that has an uphill angle, this is going to tend to create separation. The top bar can stay the same. In this example, top bar stays the same. I'm only messing with the bottom bar of my 4-link. And with an uphill angle from the rear end to the chassis, I'm going to tend to introduce more separation. And you notice, I'm not even worried about my percentage of anti-squat in these calculations. I can have an instant center that's somewhat below the neutral line, but if I have an uphill bar angle, I'm still going to introduce some separation. Remember, this is just a point on your plot for which you can reference where your car is currently set up. These are very important fundamentals of understanding what your chassis is doing. With a radial, we got to drive the radial into the track, we got to separate, and we got to keep the radial planted. Wheel speed and a radial is not your friend. You're trying to dead hook a radial. The challenge with a slick is not dead hooking a slick as you get more prepped. On the street, you've really got to, even with a slick, control wheel speed. Because the minute you start getting a little wheel speed, you are walking a fine line between maintaining momentum going forward and just breaking out into a spin and losing your momentum going forward. So your G meter falls off, your drive shaft speed goes way up, and you're not going that way. You're kind of sitting still. If you are running a slick, big tire or small tire, and you're trying to do some no prep racing, or some street racing, or back of the track racing, call it whatever you want, and you're running 130, 150, or you're over 100% anti-squat, try to look at what your bottom bar is doing. Is it level, or is it pointing up or pointing down? Here's some advice to you. If you're struggling, and your car, when on the hit on a no prep surface, is just going straight into tire spin, and you have an uphill bar angle on your bottom bar, leave the top bar alone, as long as it's not like some freaking crazy angle down, right? I mean, here again, I'm trying to give you a balanced approach here to start with a baseline. Have the top bar between 8 and 12 degrees. 10 degrees is really a sweet spot on a lot of top bars, especially with a spread of 10 to 11 inches between the top and bottom bar on the rear end. Okay, this video I'm not going to get into spreads too much. But let's say you got a decent downhill bar angle on your top bar, and you're going up into immediate tire spin on your slick car, and you're running an uphill bottom bar angle from the rear end to the chassis. Bring the bottom bar down to level. Ideally, if you're going to make a change, bring the bottom bar down to where it's a little bit of a downhill angle as you come from the rear end to the chassis. And I'm talking 1 to maybe 3 degrees. That's it. Especially if you're around a 22 to 23 inch Fourlink bar. Just bring that bar down 1 to 2 holes to see if you can get it just a little bit below 0 degrees, and then go retest. But when you do that, we got to make some shock changes. With the bottom bar level, ideally just a tad going downhill, you're going to now be using your compression valving more to control the attitude and the hit on the sidewall. One thing I failed to mention earlier in this video is whenever I had Tony make these changes, he brought the bottom bar up 1 hole on the rear end, we brought the top bar down 1 hole on the rear end and up 1 hole on the chassis. I also had Tony bring the shocks down on the rear end mount and then reset the ride height back with the coil spring, because I needed more shock compression travel to introduce some of this squat. So please don't overlook that. You still got to have some decent rebound valving, but I have used this tactic, and I used it with the Barracuda, who didn't have a very strong set of rebound valving shocks. I think, like I said, they were single adjustable shocks. Can you run an uphill bar angle with slicks? Yes, you can. Absolutely, you can. But it does require more attention to your rebound valving in your shocks. It absolutely does. Generally, I'm shooting for a level bottom bar or just a tad downhill to bring some weight transfer over the rear of the car and then keep the front end under control. I don't want the front end yanking up, extending the shock, and then coming back down, because the minute it yanks up and starts to come back down, I'm pulling weight off of the rear end, and I'm just going to probably initially hook I'm going to get out a couple feet and then go up into tire spin. You don't have control of your front end if that's happening to you. You want the front end coming up slow and keep coming up until you get past the 60-foot line, and then you want to hold the attitude of the front end as best as you can with compression valving as you make the run. Now it's naturally going to start to come back down, but at that point you should be planted, you should be up on top of the slick, and hopefully you're controlling wheel speed and getting through the run. So dig or separate with slicks. I've done both. It depends on what you've got in your combination. If you're struggling with instant wheel speed on the hit, evaluate where you're at. If you have an uphill bottom bar angle from the rear end to the chassis, bring it down. If you can't bring it down and you're in the bottom hole already, and I see cars who are set up this way, the chassis brackets were welded mainly for a different setup than what you're trying to run, then you may have to lower your chassis ride height with your shocks and coil springs. And I've had a couple people actually go cut their brackets off and re-weld them and have a lot of success with that. Here again, guys, these are principles that I hope you can understand and apply to your car on what we're trying to do with our slicks and with Fourlink. If you have a ladder bar and the ladder bar is level from the rear end to the chassis or a little up, it's absolutely going to separate because of just how short your point is on the chassis and how far behind the instant center is, and the fact that you don't have an upper bar acting on the chassis. Your upper bar is welded to the bottom bar and you have one chassis mount point. If you're really struggling getting good traction and holding traction with your ladder bars, you can put a slight downward angle on your ladder bar to help introduce a little less rear separation and actually try to bring in a little bit of squat where you bring some weight over the rear tire. That's why you have multiple mount points on your ladder bar. Okay guys, I hope this made sense, and I'm going to do more videos on slicks and different things as we progress along. I wanted to get this video out to lay a foundation so that we can continue talking about dig or separation with slicks, prep, no prep, back of the track, whatever you want to call it. More videos to come. Just remember, we're trying to do three things. We want to go fast, we want to go straight, and we want to be safe. Good day, guys.
Tu